So welcome everyone. Today we have a very special guest with the pre-law shadowers today. We have Kyla Lee. She is a DUI attorney out in BC. So without further ado, I will let Kyla introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Kyla Lee. Like I said, I'm a DUI lawyer, which is not really a term we use in Canada, but I do anything related to driving. So I do traffic tickets, impaired driving, driving while prohibited, dangerous driving charges. I basically tell people if you can do it wrong in a car, then I will defend it. And I like the term DUI lawyer. I actually have it, I think, on my website. Because that's what people put into Google. So people find me because they're looking for that, but technically we don't use that in Canada. And I always find it funny that clients look for me and refer to me as that, even though it's not a legal term here. So there we go.
Yeah, it's something when it rolled off my tongue, I went, yeah, that's probably not the best way. I should have introduced you as a criminal lawyer, but we'll keep going. So just to get started, I guess, where did you attend university?
I did my undergrad at UBC, and I also did law school there.
Oh, okay. So that was going to be my next question. So you attended law school at UBC. Did you major in a criminal, in your undergrad, did you major in a public policy, poli-sci, or criminological background?
Kind of. My major was in First Nation studies, now Indigenous studies. So it essentially was sort of policy and sociology and criminology was a lot of it, because I always wanted to be a lawyer and always knew I was going to go to law school. So I focused the courses that I took and the studies that I did on Indigenous issues, particularly with the justice system. In our fourth year, we had to do like a presentation, like the 400 level course was just this presentation course where you research with a community organization and then you present to the community the results of your research. And so I worked with the Native Court Worker and Counselor Society of BC, looking specifically at ways to prevent youth overrepresentation and Indigenous youth overrepresentation in the justice system.
Wow, that's absolutely fascinating. That's incredible, actually.
Yeah.
So was there any real reason that you went just UBC and then UBC to law school, or was it like it kind of just fell into place, or was there a certain reason you went that way?
I went to UBC initially for my undergrad because I got a scholarship that would pay for my whole first year.
Oh, that's awesome.
Tight. So I took the one that was paid for. And then when I was applying to law schools, I wasn't like super happy with UBC, and I didn't really love my undergrad experience sort of with UBC, the institution. But I also didn't really want to leave the West Coast. I like BC. It's lovely here. We were just talking about that.
Yeah.
And all my family is here. So I applied to just UBC and U of A law schools and got into them and decided to stay here.
Okay, that's a perfect reason for staying here. So I guess when you got into law school, I guess we'll kind of go down the path of law school while we're on the topic. What were some of the misconceptions, I guess, you had either from your experience prior or your experience while you were in it versus prior? Could you maybe attest to a little bit about that?
Well, I will tell you a story of misconceptions that is my very first day of law school. I thought that when you went to law school, you were supposed to like look like a lawyer and act like a lawyer and, you know, the role. So I looked like in a suit with this lovely top that I got at Value Village that was really pretty, and went to law school. I'm like, you know, prepared. I can walk into a courtroom right now and look like I belong. And everybody's like in jeans and hoodies and, you know, casual clothes. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so humiliated. I was totally embarrassed because I thought it would look like being a lawyer. So that was my first misconception. My very first day, I was like, okay, this is not going to be what I expected. I think there's also, like, with law school, a lot of misconceptions sort of about the way that the material's taught. Like if you watch television shows and films about law school, it's that whole Socratic method. And I only had one professor the entire time who did that. The majority of my law school time, it was professors who were, who were asking us to engage in discussions. We'd break out into groups and do little group work in the class, or they'd just lecture like in the undergrad classes when you just didn't pay attention.
Right.
So I guess the third misconception is that law school is really hard, because it's not. And everybody, you go on law Twitter and like law school Twitter especially, and they're all like, oh my God, it's so hard and I'm crushing myself. But it's really not. They don't want you to fail. Like, they do not want you to fail because it's very bad for them in their statistics and their rankings, the more students that fail. So they will work with you to make sure that you pass and make sure that you graduate. So don't panic. And if you're struggling with the material, you can talk to your professors, you can talk to the law school, you can get more time to do exams, defer things, that type of stuff. They will accommodate you because it's better to accommodate you than to have you fail.
I think that's absolutely reassuring to hear, because obviously we're pre-law here. So a lot of people are still in their undergrad, they're in attendance today. Some people struggle obviously in undergrad the first year, is university really for me? So they may be having these same sort of thoughts going into law school and maybe choose to forego it. So it's very reassuring to know that, it's not like on the TV shows where it's going to be, if you mess up one thing, you're booted out and you're done forever type thing. It's one of those things where they're going to work with you and they want to see you succeed. So I think that's really reassuring to have. Just while we're kind of on, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if people are saying that, people who are watching are worried that because they, their first year of undergrad, they didn't do very well, I will tell you that my first year of undergrad, I almost failed out of school. I went from being the top academic performer in my high school, and like I graduated, I think, with more high school credits than anybody else in the province the year I graduated.
Wow.
Yeah, I was an overachiever. To almost failing out in my first year of undergrad and
Wow.
getting extremely bad grades. And that did not hold me back. They don't look at your first year. They look at sort of your top grades from your last 2 years, or your top sort of certain percentage of grades, depending on the school. So don't panic if your first year was rough. It's not going to hold you back. You can be a failure like me and still succeed.
Clearly things worked out pretty well for you in the end. So that's the good news, obviously. While we're just kind of on the topic of things that are kind of challenging, so obviously you had to write the LSAT to get into law school. What was your experience like when you wrote the LSAT, or do you have any advice for people that are studying right now? How did you study that sort of realm?
I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't really study very much for the LSAT. I'm Métis, so I was applying
Okay.
in the Indigenous category. And at least at the time that I was applying, you had to do the LSAT, but you didn't have to have any particular score on it. It has in the last little while gotten more competitive for Indigenous applicants. Like at the time I applied, pretty much everyone got in, and it was like there were like 20 applicants and 20 Indigenous students in my year. Now there's like a couple hundred, and they're rejecting people. Wow. So I don't have great advice on that. But I heard from people that I went to school with who did do a lot of prep for the LSAT that those courses were really helpful because they taught you how to think about the questions. And those logic puzzles like do not make any sense to me, and somebody would have had to break it down for me like I was a child for me to understand them.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. I know it's one of those things where sometimes I know, like, I personally just graduated university, and we went to a seminar, and someone said they paid like $1,000 for it, and then they said I could have found everything on Khan Academy and had everything the same thing and saved $1,000. So I think it's one of those things where maybe some people study better than others and they have their own preferred methods, right? So
and by the time you're third year of undergrad or fourth year and you're looking at applying to law school or graduate school, you're going to have an idea of your learning style, and you're going to know whether you're really good as an independent teacher. The limited studying that I did for the LSAT, I got one of those books that you can buy for like $30 at Chapters at the time when Chapters was a thing. You can get them on Amazon, like an LSAT prep book, and I just went through that just to get an idea. So if you're a good self-teacher, good self-studier, doing something like that. But I know for some people, the instruction method works really well. And if that's the case, then it's worth the investment for you to, sign up for a course. And you can also find a private LSAT tutor. There's lots of them always on Craigslist.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for the advice. Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess once you kind of completed law school, was criminal law kind of what first interested you? And was that how you first got into your career?
Criminal law always interested me. I went into law school thinking I wanted to do Indigenous law, but I always really liked criminal law because I like things that make me laugh. I'm not gonna lie. Criminal law is the most, to me, engaging because you get people that are in extremely unusual situations. Usually they're drunk, my clients, especially. And so they're acting like idiots, and it's very entertaining. Like the facts of the case keep you interested. And reading those
Okay.
cases in school, if you're reading a case about the distribution of assets and will, that's some material that's going to put you to sleep. Like the first thing I read in law school was the Quebec secession reference, was
Oh, okay.
about whether or not legally Quebec could secede from Canada. And like that is not the type of thing that is going to keep you engaged in the material. And then I started reading the criminal law cases and I was like, oh dude, this guy like stabbed somebody and then ran from the police. It's like a TV show. So that definitely got me interested because it kept my attention. But I
Right.
also found that as I learned more about the Indigenous law issues, the type of stuff that I thought Indigenous law would be is not what Indigenous law is. Like you'll spend 15, 20 years working on one file, on one treaty
Wow.
negotiation, or on one, economic development negotiation, something like that. And for me,
Wow.
that was not, I wanted to be in the courtroom. I wanted to be arguing things. I wanted to be cross-examining witnesses. I wanted to be like the lawyer on TV.
Right. Okay.
And so I quickly saw that if you want to be doing that, you're going to get the most experience in that if you go into criminal law.
Okay. Interesting. Um, that's a very incredible insight, and honestly, that's something that I think maybe some people don't know about is that once you read the facts of the case, especially, there are some interesting things that are involved that can, really make your opinion sway one way or another, or make you, like you say, just downright laugh. So I think that's an insight that really maybe not a lot of people knew about. So thank you very much for providing us with that. I guess when you started working in your career of criminal law, or just even the field of law, I know you just mentioned it's kind of funny a lot of the time. Has that been kind of the most eye-opening experience that you've had, or have there been other ones that have really opened your eyes to? You also touched on how long some of the treaty negotiations take in Indigenous law. Is there other aspects that have been really eye-opening for you?
I mean, as a lawyer and also in law school, I saw way more sort of layers of injustice than I saw in the world before. And I think I was always like a very like socially justice minded person my entire life. But like just to see the institutional structures and to understand better how those institutional structures contribute to oppression of marginalized individuals, that I think was just it's really hard. Like some days in this job you just feel so sad
Yeah.
about the state of the world, which is why
Yeah.
maybe everybody should be a trust lawyer because then you don't really have to worry about it. But like, yeah, just seeing, I see people that come from these horrible backgrounds and they work so hard to get to a good position. They have a slip, and then all of a sudden they're facing like a significant jail sentence for one mistake. And our system doesn't do enough to protect people from the sort of consequences of being brought up in a system that continues to oppress people for reasons of poverty or race or ethnicity or like all sorts of factors. It just yeah. Anyway, sorry to get depressing.
No, it's okay. Very insightful, to be brutally honest with you. And it's one of those things I don't think a lot of people realize, right? There are a lot of injustices in the world. You see what's kind of going on in Israel right now, and it's something that if you didn't know about before, you definitely know about it now, right? So I think that's absolutely a great insight to provide to everyone. Excuse me. So I'm just gonna, I guess, still going into your career. You obviously specialize in impaired driving cases currently right now, obviously giving away the DUI attorney at the start. How did you get into that? If you want to just kind of get into how you got into that and why you kind of got into that, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I got into it by accident.
Okay.
When I was in my second year of law school, I was looking for a second year summer position, and I got sick with H1N1 and had to be quarantined. Everybody now is like, oh, but like at the time, so yeah, I didn't know what that meant, and I'm like in my house all by myself, and I had nothing else to do but sit there and try not to die. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to send out resumes to like literally every criminal law firm I can find on Google. And maybe somebody will hire me. I was just trying to find a job for the summer. And I got hired at the firm that I'm still at today to be their summer student. So that's how I got sort of started in the area of impaired driving. And when I started working, I was given some files to review and research. I just really liked it. I liked the work. And I know that sounds ridiculous because you think, oh, drunk drivers, like, how exciting could that possibly be besides the hilarious things they do? I discovered the best way in criminal law to get to litigate issues about people's rights. And if you look at the history of the charter and all of our legal rights, your right to contact a lawyer, your right to silence, all of those rights and the interpretation of them when the charter was introduced in 1982, flowing even to now, is all happening in cases involving people who are drivers. That's the most forum.
Wow.
It's most common for somebody to say, my right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure was violated. I was arbitrarily detained. All of these things tend to come up in the context of impaired driving before they come up anywhere else, which is just to me like fascinating. So the thing that got me so interested in criminal law, the hilarious facts, plus the desire to, litigate and be in a courtroom and cross-examine and argue, impaired driving was literally the perfect marriage of those things.
Right. Oh, that's something I didn't even know about. That's absolutely fascinating, and it's interesting that, you take this incredible document that's essentially, our constitution, and it's based on, well, not based on, but a lot of what you're saying, like a lot of these cases delve into these issues of, like you say, right to reasonable search and seizure, right to be detained, right? So I think that's incredible insight that person I didn't know about. And I think it's awesome to pass on and give to everyone else, actually. If you could maybe attest to a little bit, just I guess we'll go into your career a little bit more. What are some of the successes you've had either in law school through like moot court or obviously at your firm, like maybe in moot court, or even at a superior court level? Could you maybe attest to a little bit of something like that?
Okay. Well, in law school, I didn't have a lot of successes. I was a very middling student, a solid, slightly below the curve average. But I made lots of friends. Yeah, that was my law school experience. Actually, no, there was one thing. I did a project in a class. I did a class on prison law. And our professor for the project said, you can do anything you want. Your entire grade will be based on anything you want. Engage with the purely, I know, it sounds like great. It sounds like the ideal thing where you're like, yes, I can do, I don't have to write a paper and I don't have to write an exam. But then you're like, okay, now my entire grade is writing on this one thing.
Right.
And I have no direction. And so I did at the time I was working part-time as a model. And so I did a high fashion photo shoot exploring the issues that women in prison face through a series of images, and submitted them as my project. And I got a really good grade, which was good. And the professor afterwards told me that he wanted to use my project as an example to the other students in other years of like a creative way to like really do a good job of engaging with the material. So that was kind of cool. That was a victory.
Absolutely. That's like absolutely incredible. I guess kind of still going into your career, obviously with COVID, things have been totally thrown upside down. And we were talking earlier about the difference between being here in Toronto and you out in BC. What is something that you've maybe noticed? Have you noticed your workload changing, or perhaps have you noticed an increase of perhaps DUIs or other aspects of criminal law because of COVID or since the pandemic started?
Yeah, definitely. We, since the pandemic started, have seen a decrease in drunk driving because in BC, our liquor service hours have been shortened, so you can't get liquor after 10. We also, you know, during the period of time where in March last year, people were just all staying at home and not going anywhere. We had people that weren't going out, they weren't partying, they weren't drinking. So I went from having, I usually have on average like 10 to 20 roadside prohibition hearings a week.
Wow.
I'm now lucky if I get 10 in a week.
Wow.
So that's like for me, for my business, it's a massive decline. But we saw a corresponding increase in the number of traffic tickets that were being issued because officers were freed up from all the other stuff that they were dealing with that was regularly happening out in the world to sit on the side of the street and do speed enforcement. And because there were so few cars on the road, they could do speed enforcement in places that they wouldn't normally due to traffic, like volume of traffic, be able to do it. So we saw like a tripling of the number of speeding tickets that we were getting. So, you know, we sort of balanced out. But yeah, overall, it's been not a great year. Fun.
Yeah, understandable. I guess kind of going off that, this is something that personally I just kind of found out. I know Peel Brampton here in Ontario, it has like the highest turnover, I guess, rate of from when you get arrested to when your trial date is. It's like the longest period in the entire country. And they've shortened that pretty decently with COVID. They've been able to get through things a little bit quicker, obviously. Have you noticed any sort of change like that, either in your own practice or in BC in general that you know of?
Yes. BC has had sort of the least problem with delays in our courts for a variety of reasons that the Senate mentioned in their justice delayed is justice denied report. But our time to trial has sped up significantly. And there's lots of reasons for it. We now have a lot of our court appearances are done virtually. So anything that's the actual trial is mostly being done virtually. People can do their sentencing hearings by telephone. So they don't actually have to go into the courtroom. They can just call in as long as they're not going to jail. Lawyers can appear on MS Teams, which has been really convenient because, you know, before, if you had something that you had to do in Chilliwack in the morning, this probably won't make sense to your but if you had something in one town in the morning, you probably couldn't schedule a trial for the afternoon in a different town because you'd have to go do that matter, wait around in court, and then leave and go to the other place. But now you can be in multiple different court locations at once. So it makes lawyers like more available to go to court, which speeds things up. And then we also instituted a new system where prior to scheduling a trial date, you have to have a meeting with a judge. You guys were already doing this in Ontario, probably because of your delay issue. But you have to have a meeting with a judge and the prosecutor that's off the record. And the judge is like, can't we resolve this? Please resolve it. And so we saw a massive increase in the number of files that were being resolved pre-trial. So fewer cases were going to trial.
Okay, that's absolutely interesting. I guess my next sort of question, just while we're on the case, sort of the path of courts and trials and that sort of thing. Have you dealt at kind of all levels of court, like even just, you know, just from trial court to the BC Supreme Court to anything else that you could maybe attest to?
Oh yeah, on like an average day pre-COVID, I would, in the morning, I'd be doing a hearing with an adjudicator at a tribunal, and then I'd be rushing off to traffic court to do a traffic ticket. And then from there, I'd pop over across the street to Supreme Court, and I'd probably have a plea in the afternoon by phone. And there were days where I'd be in the Court of Appeal, the traffic court, and the provincial court, all in the same day, and
Wow.
that's just like a normal day. Yeah, and I've been to the Supreme Court of Canada before as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Are you able to talk just a little bit about the case in the Supreme Court and what it was like going to the Supreme Court, if you can?
It was the coolest thing ever.
I wouldn't doubt it.
It was a case involving a guy who got a roadside driving prohibition. It was a
Okay.
3-day driving prohibition, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, which I thought was cool. Everybody told me when I took the case. I got hired after the case was the guy initially succeeded in Supreme Court. He lost at the Court of Appeal, and then I got hired. And I said, "Oh, I'll try and take it to the Supreme Court of Canada." And literally everybody I talked to was like, "You're insane. It's a 3-day driving prohibition. There's no way they're going to think that's important enough."
Right.
And I don't know how, but I managed to persuade them it was. So I went and argued it in front of, we had a 7-judge panel.
Wow.
That was in front of, back when we had Chief Justice McLaughlin.
Wow.
And my claim to fame was they wanted an early start because there were 2 related matters being heard that day as well. And they wanted to do them all in one day. So they wanted to start early and go to the end of the day. And my claim to fame was I was the first to speak. So she did not accidentally doze off during my submissions like she did to some of the other lawyers later in the day. Like, in her defense, and everybody's in the room because we were all from BC. It was all BC legislation that was being challenged. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning for us that we started our arguments. So, and she's from BC. So, I can understand why she was like maybe a little drowsy.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, that's absolutely fascinating. I can't even believe that. I can't even fathom the thought of even being in the room with the Supreme Court Justice of Canada, honestly. So kudos to you and hats off to you for mustering through that.
After she retired, I went to a dinner for women lawyers. And I think maybe she had too much to drink at the dinner because I said, "Oh, I do video series on YouTube where I talk about cases that should have gone to the Supreme Court of Canada, but the Supreme Court denied leave. Do you want to come be a guest star on my show and we can talk about the leave application in a case?" And she said, "Okay." And then she followed through. And so, she was on my YouTube series.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. That's absolutely incredible.
It was the weirdest day of my life. It was like the former Chief Justice is in my car and I am driving her to my office. It's so weird.
That's an absolutely incredible story. That is absolutely unbelievable. You're almost like, you could say BFFs with the former Supreme Court Chief Justice.
I was like, we're best friends now.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I guess one of my final questions, as someone who's obviously an extremely successful lawyer with an absolutely amazingly triumphant career, what advice could you give to the people in attendance today, either that are thinking about going to law school, maybe the LSAT, or just the field of law in general, if you have any advice for any of us?
Okay. Well, the biggest piece of advice that I give everybody who asks me for advice is, if you want something, ask for it. You want to meet with a lawyer, ask them, because you would be surprised. I adopted this several years ago, hence my asking the Chief Justice if she would go on my YouTube series, of deciding that the worst thing that could happen if I want something and I tell people that I want it is that they can tell me no. And then where am I? I'm in the same position I am now, wanting something and not having it. So if I want something, I ask for it. And it is amazing how many people will actually work to accommodate you. And lawyers, especially, if you want to make connections in the legal world, you want to know what it's like to be a lawyer or anything like that, literally pick up the phone, call a lawyer, call me, I don't care. Email somebody, because people will say yes more than they will say no. People don't like to say no. Like, psychologically, we don't like saying no to people, and especially lawyers, because we're programmed mentally to help people. So we will do what we can to make things happen for you. Also, if you invite a lawyer to lunch, they will always pick up the tab. That's the rule. You ask the lawyer for lunch, the lawyer always has to pay for the student. So, as soon as you guys can, go out for lunch with people again. Don't
Perfect. I will
take you to lunch. They'll pay.
I will keep that in the back of my pocket for sure. That's all the questions that I really have. So I guess we'll open the floor up to the people in attendance if they want to raise their hand and then unmute themselves. We can take questions, or if they want to put them in the chat. Everyone feel free right now. I see someone's in the chat right now. They're just asking, can you please elaborate on the actual legal arguments that you had in front of the Supreme Court?
Yes. Okay. This is going to be very technical lawyer talk. My argument was about, so in BC, the Motor Vehicle Act says that you can issue a person a 3-day driving prohibition if you have reasonable grounds as a result of an analysis on a roadside breathalyzer to believe their ability to drive is affected by alcohol. And it was a question of statutory interpretation in the legislation about whether that use of the term reasonable grounds denoted a requirement that the officer have to have something in addition to the reading. So some indicia of impairment, bad driving, something like that. They could observe that they could say, I don't just have a reading. I also have this thing that is consistent with being affected by alcohol and the ability to drive. And the Supreme Court of Canada said, no.
Well, like you said, you can't go anywhere without asking, right? The worst they're going to say is no, right? So,
and the real victory, like with the Supreme Court of Canada, the real victory is actually getting them to hear your case, because they get like 800 applications for cases to be heard a year, and they grant very, very, very few of them. So getting an appeal that isn't an as of right appeal before the Supreme Court of Canada is in itself a win.
Yeah, I was just going to even just even the experience, right? Just to even go there and be in the courtroom and see this is one of the most intelligent minds, I guess, in law in Canada, right? At work, I mean, just absolutely would just be unfathomable for me. So I can absolutely see why that would just be something, just the experience itself would be daunting and something to kind of check off your bucket list, I guess.
Yep.
So do we have any other questions or anything like that right now?
I have a question. I cannot at all find the raise hand function. So I'm sorry for just unmuting like this. I just want to talk about something that you mentioned earlier about if you want something from a lawyer, if you want to talk to them, like just ask. And I mean, I can attest to that because I remember messaging when you were doing Q&A on your story. And I remember being really nervous thinking, oh, well, why would she respond to this? Or why would any lawyer, with like a professional career be interested in this? And our organization kind of is like an example of they are interested, and usually, it's very scary to ask. Even just sending an email out, I'm always like, what if they don't reply? And usually they do. And I feel like, you being here today and hearing about your experience, you're helping a lot of students. This isn't really a question, by the way, this is just a comment. But you're helping a lot of students. And the fact that you took time out of your day to be with us here today, I know we have a lot of students that message saying they couldn't attend live, but they're excited to see the recording. And that makes me really happy because the fact that you're here today, I don't know if you realize how much of an impact you're having. And for a lot of students, it could be one sentence that you said that, kind of sticks with us. And then when we go into our own careers or we kind of continue with our academic journey, like students look back and be like, oh, I remember that session that I went to with a lawyer. I went with Kyla Lee and she mentioned this and now I see what she meant. Like, for example, with law school, oh, now I see what she meant. It's not as hard, for example. And so I just wanted to just quickly say thank you for being here today.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm always happy to help. And if anybody that's like not listening right now and is listening to the recording wants to ask me a question, just email me or find me on Twitter or Instagram or wherever. My DMs on everything are open. So just contact me.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and put your Instagram in the chat just for people that want to follow or DM. We have also tagged Kyla's Instagram on the session post that we use to advertise the session.
So we just have another question here that pops up in the chat. Did you ever have any doubts getting into the pursuit of your legal career? And if so, what kind of changed those doubts and made your thought process a little more clear?
I mean, I never had doubts about wanting to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer from the very beginning of my life. And my entire life, like, people were always like, oh, you should be a lawyer, which they did not mean in a nice way. But there were certainly times, especially, early on in my career and when I was articling, when I thought, I don't know if this is for me. Like, it's very competitive. And the type of people who go into law are very competitive people. And at the time I was having like a personality clash with somebody that I worked with. And so it was very hard for me, because I thought, is this just like going to be like reliving high school for the rest of my life? If that's what being a lawyer is like, I don't want to be a lawyer. I didn't want to be in high school either. But it got there, and there's a lot of, especially early in your sorry, somebody's coming into my yard. Sorry, one sec. I love when they bring your pets, or like when they're pets. Like with Jolene.
It is the best. It is the best, honestly. Even back with Jolene, like, she had her dog last time that was just sitting by her feet. She was telling me.
I have a very grouchy dog. Okay, what was I saying? Yeah, there's, early in your career, especially as a woman, you face a lot of like self-doubt. And I still now get like the imposter syndrome, where I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. For me, it manifests as like extreme guilt. Like I will lie in bed and I will feel guilty, like I've ruined somebody's life, or like I've done something wrong. And there's no like client that I can pinpoint it to, or case or conversation. It's just this weird manifestation of imposter syndrome. And, the only thing you can do is focus on the things that you've done right and remind yourself that you deserve to be here. And if you didn't deserve to be a lawyer, you wouldn't be one, because there are enough barriers that you would literally be weeded out.
Yeah. I think that's an awesome response to that. And I mean, it's something that's very true. It's one of those things like, yeah, you're either cut out for it or you're not, unfortunately. Whether, like you said, you're either weeded out through the LSAT process or through the schooling aspect, or just even the workload, whatever the case may be. Obviously, it's something I don't know. You know it better than me, but I think that they, like you say, they do a good job of making sure that you're going to be ready for it and that you are made to do it. So I have another question here. Nathan asked, what did you do the summer before you went to law school? So I guess finishing your undergrad to law school.
Yeah, I graduated from my undergrad, even though I almost failed first year and was on academic probation. I actually graduated a semester early. Okay.
Wow.
And I worked as an educational assistant. So supporting students who had disabilities in schools, so like dealing with kids with autism, things like that. And then when the like regular school year ended, I worked at the liquor store.
Wow.
Very glamorous.
There you go. You don't need a big high profile top tier law firm job to hack it, I guess. Anything will do. Okay, so that makes sense. We had another lawyer that said previously she just took the summer off and hung out on the beach when she was in between summers at law school. And she said it helped her get through the experience mentally and physically and kind of spiritually, she said. So I guess it's not something you have to be, you have to fit the mold, I guess, for it. You can do whatever you want to do. We have another question here. What do you like and dislike the most about criminal law?
Okay. I like, obviously, the courtroom stuff. The cross-examination is probably my favorite thing to do. I wrote a book about cross-examination earlier this year, if anybody ever wants to read it. Very expensive. It's a legal textbook, so it costs a lot. don't buy it now. Wait until you have a job and then make your firm buy it for you. the So yeah, that's probably the thing I like the most, is essentially forcing people to tell me what I want to hear. The power is quite intoxicating. And the thing I like least is client management. I'm not great at talking to people. As you can probably tell, I'm very awkward, and I I don't like talking on the phone, and so sort of dealing with that aspect of it, like, you know, getting clients to hire me and then updating them on their cases and talking to them about their cases. I'd rather just be doing the work and, like, the rest of the time hide under my blankets.
Yeah. Okay, understandable. It makes sense. It's definitely one of those things, I guess, but like any job, right? There's going to be aspects you don't like versus aspects you do like. So I guess you got to outweigh the pros, got to outweigh the cons, like you say. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
I agree with it. We have another question here. What helps you when people approach you, or I guess see you as a bad person, maybe for defending a criminal or anything like that? Can you attest maybe a little bit more to that?
Well, it's never really bothered me when people do that, and people, like, I don't think there's a day that goes by where somebody doesn't comment on one of my social media posts saying that I'm like scum or whatever for defending drunk drivers. So really, if it bothered me, I wouldn't be doing this for 9 years. But I mean, all the people that are my clients are people who are accused of crimes. They're not criminals. They're innocent because the charter protects your right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. So I'm not defending bad people. And I guess the other thing that helps me, like, you know, in those situations where you know your client's guilty, is, which are also way easier. It's way easier to have a guilty client than an innocent one. As an innocent client, you know, you're much more terrified about everything that can happen to them if they, you know, if you don't win the case. Whereas with a guilty client, if you don't win the case, then they get a sentence that they deserve because they're guilty. So it's like, okay, well, that, you know, I tried my best and that's all you really
Right.
can do. But for innocent clients, you feel like, you know, just the stress of it is a lot worse. What helps me is remembering that most of my clients are in the situation they're in because of things that have nothing to do with the crime that they committed. You know, I defended someone once who was, I mean, more than once, but one that sticks out to me, who was charged with impaired driving because she was fleeing a situation where she was being sexually assaulted, and she got in her car and drove. And
Wow.
like, you know, yeah, she's guilty. She got in her car and she drove and she'd been drinking, and that's terrible. But like, also, how does she have any moral blameworthiness for what she did? I mean, she did the most reasonable thing in the circumstances. So this, you know, this idea that people are bad people because they commit crimes, people are good people who made a mistake or who had something happen to them that led to them committing a criminal offense. This is nothing about their character as a human being.
Right. And I think that's something that's important to remember. Like, most of these people are humans just like you and me. We're all equal, right? So we all have our good days and our bad days, and sometimes our bad days outshine our good days, and they really take a toll, right? And unfortunately, we get caught sometimes, maybe caught up in the act, or the bad days just get to us. So like you said, really, what else could someone do, right, when they're in that sort of situation? So I'm just kind of looking, going through the questions one last time. Does anyone else have any sort of questions that they want to ask, or anything that they want to ask Kyla before we end this? Sorry, there's one more question here. Sorry, I just opened up the chat again. How many hours, or how much kind of behind the scenes work do you do when you prepare for court, or prepare for a trial?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. I mean, as far as like the time leading up to a trial, there's lots of time, because usually the trial's like 6 months from when you schedule the date. But it's not in reality a lot of time, because in between in those 6 months, you've got another trial every 2 days for the 6 months leading up to it. So I'm working probably 7:30 in the morning. I get into the office on a regular day, and I work till 5:36, and then I come home and I usually do some work in the evenings at home. I'm usually answering emails until I go to bed, and that's fine. That's the job. I don't
I
have
think
to, the thing about criminal law is you do not have to take more work than you want. I like being busy. I like what I do, and I like, I like the stress of it. I feed off that. But there are lawyers at my firm who are extremely successful, extremely good lawyers who have, a third of the caseload I have. They still earn a great living, and they're doing great, and they have the work-life balance that they want. So.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. It's something that I guess a lot of people don't see. Like they obviously either see it in TV, film, whatever. They just see or hear lawyers working, 10,000 hours in a week, right? And that's all they do. Their life is just strictly doing work. But it's one of those things, I guess, we have where we might have a different mindset where you don't have to take on that much work. So I guess it's something that maybe isn't as, I guess, talked about or brought up a lot. I know Aisha says she has a question. Aisha, go ahead.
Yeah, I know that there's like less than 10 minutes, so I'm really sorry, but I have one more question, and it's based on something that you mentioned. You touched on the fact that sometimes being like a woman in law or like a female lawyer can kind of have some negative, impacts, and it can affect you in ways that, maybe are not appropriate or fair. And I was wondering if you had any experiences, or if you kind of speak on how things have been for you. You're a criminal defense lawyer, you're a female, you're very successful, you're very out there. Have you ever, experienced any kind of negative criticism or negative treatment because you are a woman, or maybe people not taking you seriously? And you mentioned having to doubt yourself as well. And I'm just, as someone who wants to go into that field as well, I'm just really curious in your experience.
One thing that I get told a lot is that I am too young to be doing whatever it is that I'm doing. I wrote a book. Well, you're too young. It's too early in your career to write a book. I ran to be a bencher of the Law Society, which is like a board of governors for the Law Society, basically. Well, you're too young to be doing that, even though the Law Society rules say that at my year of call, I'm eligible to do it. I'm applying to be on various boards and committees. Well, you're too young to be doing these things. And then I see people who are roughly the same level of experience, level of call as me, but male, doing those exact same things. And nobody is saying that to them. Everybody is supporting them. And that's like sort of, I think, one of the really frustrating things that happens to women is that we get told these excuses that aren't the real reason for why we shouldn't be doing what we're doing. But I just say F the haters. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, so I didn't, but and I do what I want to do because the only person that's going to stop me is me.
Thank you so much for answering that. And honestly, I'm sure you're an inspiration to all pre-law students, but especially I can say from my own experience, like female pre-law students, you kind of want to also follow in your footsteps. And I like that you have a very, like I don't give enough attitude. You could swear, by the way. We had other lawyers on here who totally swore, and we're all students. So if anything, we just think you're cooler. But anyways, yeah, I'm glad that you now don't care anymore. And I hope that, when you were younger in your career, when you had just started off, that I hope it didn't affect you as much. But I know that a lot of young female lawyers, or even just young female law students, do have to face that kind of treatment. And I think a lot of prejudice. I've heard a lot, like even when I was younger, by like older, like male relatives and just older males where, oh, you want to be a lawyer, but you're too emotional to be a lawyer. And then it's because I'm a girl. And that's just because that's just such a stereotype, because not every girl is emotional, and there's a lot of men that are emotional too, and a lot of emotional lawyers end up becoming great lawyers because they can build good connections with their clients. So I'm glad that you're speaking about this.
If anything, the law needs more emotion, because most lawyers are very robotic, myself included. So we need more people with feelings. There's a real trend right now in BC. There's a very popular podcast called The Trauma Informed Lawyer, and it's all about being informed about, being emotionally intelligent with your clients and using that emotional intelligence to help them. It's not something that I have skills in, but there are clients who need that. There are more clients who need that than there are clients that need, the me that doesn't want to talk to them and would rather just do the legal work.
So I guess we'll open the floor up still for any more questions if anyone has any remaining ones. Then if not, then we will, oh, yep, we have one. Okay, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Adiraj.
Hi, Kyla. Sorry. I can't turn my video on currently. You'll have to stare at a blank screen. I hope that's okay. I'll just ask my question. So you're a criminal defense lawyer, if I'm not wrong. I just wanted to ask, is the process any different if you want to kind of become a prosecutor? So on the other side, in criminal law, is like, how did you get interested in the defense side specifically? Is it like, maybe it's the money or maybe whatever it is? I just wanted to know more about that side.
If you want money in criminal law, become a prosecutor, because that's the only area of criminal law where you're going to have a guaranteed income. No, I am morally opposed to jail. And so I couldn't be a prosecutor because I couldn't put people in jail. It would just break my heart every day. The other thing about being a prosecutor is there's a lot of like levels of supervision and taking direction. I kind of like to be my own boss. Like I said, I do what I want. So I wouldn't make a good prosecutor because I would do what I want and my bosses would not like it.
Oh, okay. So you kind of found more flexibility in the defense side, like in your firm, because you said you worked there before, I guess, even in law school. So yeah, I guess you were lucky in that sense. But yeah, thank you so much. I just wanted to ask another thing. Like you said, cross-examination is one of the things that you've kind of enjoyed doing, and you wrote a book on it and everything. So are there any like kind of interesting cases instead of like just DUI where you were like you kind of cross-examined or you loved the case or something like that? Just any story if you have the time, doesn't matter.
Yeah. I had a case involving an assault allegation between a guy and his former girlfriend. And I had a cross-examination that was like something out of a movie because the witness had left notes with some song lyrics in my client's car in the amount of time that they were broken up while the charges were pending. And they were all about how she wanted to get back together with him, or that's like what the lyrics were about. And I knew the song, and the next verse of the song, I know it totally sounds like a movie, right? The next verse of the song was all about how like that if they left you, if you leave me, I'll make you regret it, type of thing. And because they'd broken up and then there was this assault allegation, I got to use the song lyrics to be like, you were sending him a message that you were trying to make him regret it, and you've made this all up. And it was like, she's like laughing, like cackling on the witness stand, which was the weirdest reaction ever. And that was really cool.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Just using lyrics. Like I remember in my law class in high school, I saw a case where people used Tupac lyrics to defend something. So like something like that is just interesting. So yeah, thank you so much for doing this. As Aisha and everyone, Landon said, that this is great help for people like us who are kind of, I'm still not sure about law, but this really helps. Just talking to actual lawyers really helps more than the internet ever would. I know there's a lot of stuff, but just talking to someone is so much more better. And yes, I will definitely email you if I have something. You're a very interesting person. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Nice to chat with you.
All right, so we'll kind of start to wrap this up unless people have some more questions if they want to raise their hand or unmute themselves or send something in the chat. Otherwise, we will start to wrap this up. Going once, going twice. All right, I want to thank everyone for coming out today. Everyone take care and have a great rest of your evening. Thank you again, Kyla. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to come out. The pre-law shower is really, we're honored to have you, and thank you so much for everything. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. And like I said, everybody feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions.
Wonderful. Take care.